White police officer insults young black man without knowing his true identity. Hello. You are very welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. On a bustling street corner in a tense neighborhood of Chicago, the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows on the pavement. Jake Thompson, a middle-aged police officer with years of experience etched into the lines of his face, scanned the area with a critical eye. His patrol car, a familiar sight in the community, was parked nearby. He had a job to do, and he was determined to keep the streets in line, even if that meant confronting anyone he deemed suspicious. As he spotted Malik Johnson, a young black teenager, leaning against a lamppost, Jake's instincts kicked in. Malik was dressed in a hoodie and jeans, a common attire for someone his age, yet it triggered something darker in Jake. He approached Malik, his demeanor tense and accusatory. "Hey, you. What are you doing here?" Jake barked, his voice cutting through the ambient noise of the street. Malik looked up, startled, his heart racing as he tried to process the situation. I'm just waiting for the bus. I'm on my way to school," Malik replied, his voice steady despite the unease coursing through him. "School? Right," Jake scoffed, crossing his arms. "You think I'm going to believe that? You look like you're up to no good. Got any weapons on you?" Malik's face flushed with embarrassment and indignation. "No, sir. I'm just a student. I swear." He took a small step back, instinctively raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not doing anything wrong." Jake wasn't listening. He continued his interrogation, his mind clouded with biases. "You know, kids like you are the reason I have a job. You think you can just hang out here and not get in trouble? You need to watch your back." Malik felt the sting of humiliation wash over him, the weight of Jake's words pressing down like a heavy blanket. He wanted to argue, to shout that he was just a kid with dreams of college and a future, but instead, he felt small and powerless under the officer's glare. "I'm just trying to get an education," Malik managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. "Education? Don't make me laugh. You need to stay out of trouble first," Jake replied, a sneer forming on his lips. He turned abruptly, dismissing Malik as if he were a mere nuisance, and walked back to his patrol car, leaving the young man standing on the corner, seething with anger and hurt. As Malik walked away, the weight of humiliation clung to him like a shadow. He arrived home, his heart still racing from the encounter. His mother, a hard-working nurse, was preparing dinner when she noticed the storm brewing in his eyes. "Malik, honey, what's wrong?" she asked, putting down a pot and wiping her hands on a towel. Malik hesitated, the words caught in his throat. He wanted to tell her about the officer, about how he had been treated like a criminal simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, but the shame mixed with his pride held him back. "Nothing, Mom. I'm fine," he replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Are you sure? You know you can talk to me about anything," she pressed gently, her concern evident. "Really, I'm okay," he insisted, his voice tighter than he intended. He walked to his room, leaving his mother with an uneasy frown. Once inside, Malik dropped his backpack onto the floor and sat at his desk, staring blankly at his scattered school supplies. His dreams of attending university felt distant and fragile, overshadowed by the harsh reality of how he was perceived by others. As he picked up a textbook, he felt a surge of frustration and anger welling up inside him. He wanted to scream at the injustice, to let the world know that he was more than just a stereotype. Malik glanced at the clock. He had to focus on his studies if he wanted to escape this life. But the encounter with Jake lingered in his mind like a bad taste. The injustice of being judged solely on his appearance was a bitter pill to swallow, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the feeling that society would never see him as anything other than a potential criminal. With a heavy sigh, he opened the textbook, trying to drown out the echoes of the officer's words. But as he turned the pages, his thoughts drifted back to the corner where he had stood earlier, the weight of the world pressing down on him. "Why can't they see me for who I really am?" he thought, the frustration igniting a fire within him. I won't let this define me. And with that determination, Malik pushed forward, trying to focus on his future despite the harsh realities surrounding him. Jake Thompson sat in his patrol car, parked at the edge of a busy intersection, staring blankly through the windshield. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch across his mind. He replayed the earlier encounter with Malik Johnson over and over, each repetition gnawing at him with a new layer of discomfort. The insults he had hurled, the assumptions he had made, they echoed in his head like an unwelcome soundtrack. Why did I do that? He muttered to himself, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Memories of his younger brother flooded back, a torrent of regret and sorrow. Tommy had been his world, his little sidekick. But as they grew older, Tommy slipped away from Jake's protective grasp, gravitating toward a life on the wrong side of the law. Jake had watched helplessly as his brother became embroiled in drugs and crime, his heart breaking with every bad decision Tommy made. That experience had warped his view of the world, making him see threats everywhere, especially in young black men like Malik. "Jake, you need to let it go," he said aloud, trying to convince himself. Yet the words felt hollow. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had perpetuated a cycle of pain, one that his brother had suffered from, and now Malik was caught in the same trap. The radio crackled with static, pulling him from his thoughts. His partner, Officer Rodriguez, called out from the dispatch, "Hey, Thompson, you good over there?" "Yeah, just thinking," Jake replied, forcing a smile that his partner couldn't see. He knew Rodriguez would be skeptical. His partner always could read him like a book. "Thinking? You've been doing a lot of that lately. You need to let go of the past, man. It's eating you alive." "I know," Jake sighed. "It's just hard to forget." Meanwhile, Malik sat on his bed, the weight of humiliation pressing down on him. He had just walked in from that dreadful encounter, feeling as if his worth had been stripped away with each insult hurled at him. He tossed his backpack onto the floor and slumped against the wall. His mother, a dedicated nurse, entered the room, her brow furrowed with concern. "Malik, honey, are you all right? You look—" "Mom, I'm fine," he snapped, biting back the tears. "Just tired." "Don't lie to me," she said gently, sitting beside him. "I can see it in your eyes. What happened out there?" Malik hesitated, his heart racing. He didn't want to burden her with his pain, especially when she worked so hard to provide for them. "It's just the usual stuff, you know? The cops." His mother took a deep breath. "I know it's tough, but you have to remember that you're not defined by their ignorance, Malik. You're so much more than what they see." "I get that, but it's hard to keep my head up when they look at me like I'm a criminal just because of the color of my skin," Malik said, frustration spilling over. "I'm just trying to go to school and make something of myself." His mother placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "And you will. You're smart, talented. You have dreams. Don't let their hate dim your light." "Sometimes I wonder if it's even worth it," Malik admitted, his voice cracking. "Of course, it's worth it," she insisted. "You're going to make a difference, Malik. Just keep pushing forward. Promise me you won't give up." "Promise," he whispered, though doubt still lingered in his mind. He glanced at the pile of books on his desk, reminders of his aspirations. He wanted to go to college, to build a life free from the shadows that loomed over him. But each encounter with the police chipped away at that dream. Back in the patrol car, Jake knew he needed to change. He felt the need to confront his biases, to confront the very things that had shaped his worldview. "I can't keep doing this," he murmured to himself. "I need to find a way to connect with them, to understand." He envisioned attending workshops, learning about bias and community relations. "I owe it to them," he said, determination swelling within him. "I owe it to Malik." The sun was setting over the city of Chicago, casting a warm golden hue across the park where Malik Johnson stood among a gathering of activists. The air was charged with anticipation as community members united, their voices rising in a chorus of solidarity against police brutality. Malik's heart raced as he absorbed the energy of the crowd, a medley of faces, young and old, reflecting a shared determination for change. Among them was his mother, a fierce advocate for justice, rallying the people around her with her passionate speeches. "Remember why we're here," she exclaimed, her voice echoing through the park. "We are not just fighting for ourselves. We are fighting for our children, for our future." The crowd erupted in applause, their spirits lifted by her words. Malik felt a swell of pride as he watched her command the attention of the crowd. He knew the weight she carried on her shoulders, the countless sleepless nights spent worrying about the safety of her family, especially after the incident with Jake Thompson. Malik's own experience with the officer lingered in his mind, a painful reminder of the prejudice he faced simply because of his appearance. He wanted to contribute to the movement, to share his story, but the fear of being judged again gnawed at him. "Are you going to speak?" A friend nudged him, breaking his reverie. Malik hesitated, glancing at the makeshift stage where other speakers were preparing to share their experiences. "I don't know," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if they don't listen?" "They will listen," his friend encouraged. "You have a voice, Malik. Use it." Taking a deep breath, Malik stepped forward, feeling the weight of his doubts slowly lift. He made his way to the stage, his heart pounding louder with each step. As he stood behind the microphone, he scanned the crowd, locking eyes with his mother, who smiled encouragingly. He felt a surge of courage. "Hello, everyone," he began, his voice steady despite the tremors of anxiety. "My name is Malik Johnson, and I'm here to tell you that we are more than the label society places on us. We are students, dreamers, and we deserve to be treated with respect." As he spoke, Malik poured his heart out, recounting the day he was humiliated by Officer Jake Thompson. "I was just a kid trying to get to school. I wanted to make something of myself, but that day, I was made to feel like a criminal." The crowd murmured in empathy, and Malik could see their faces reflecting unspoken understanding. "I want to thank my mom for always believing in me," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "She taught me to rise above the hate and to fight for what's right. We need to keep fighting, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who has been silenced." As Malik concluded his speech, the crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing throughout the park. But amidst the celebration, he noticed a familiar figure lingering at the edge of the crowd. Jake Thompson, in his police uniform, stood in silence, watching him with an expression Malik couldn't quite decipher. Jake wrestled with his own thoughts as he observed the protest. He had witnessed countless protests during his years on the force, but this was different. There was a raw sincerity in the voices that rose around him, a palpable desire for change that tugged at his conscience. He had come to patrol the area, but part of him felt drawn to Malik's words. A voice in his head urged him to turn back, to retreat to the safety of his patrol car, but he remained rooted in place, listening with an openness he hadn't felt before. When Malik finished speaking, Jake's instinct was to leave, to hide behind the badge that had provided him with a sense of authority. But he found himself moving against the tide of his instincts. He stepped forward, drawn by the need to connect, to understand.
"Hey, Malik,"
Jake called out, his voice rising above the crowd. Malik turned, surprise etched across his face. "Can we talk?" Malik's heart raced as he considered the request. Part of him wanted to refuse, to walk away from the officer who had caused him so much pain. But he also recognized the weight of the moment, the potential for change that could emerge from this unlikely encounter. "Why should I?" Malik replied, his tone cautious but curious. "Because I want to understand," Jake answered, sincerity ringing in his voice. "I want to hear your story and learn from it. I know I messed up. I need to do better." Malik hesitated, the tension in the air thick as the two stood amidst the crowd, their worlds colliding. It was an unexpected opportunity, one that could either deepen the divide or begin to bridge it. Taking a breath, Malik nodded slowly. "Okay, let's talk." As they moved to a quieter corner of the park, The rest of the crowd faded into the background, but the weight of their shared experiences loomed large. In that moment, both Malik and Jake realized they were on the brink of something transformative. On the day of the protest, Malik stood in front of his mirror, adjusting his shirt for what felt like the 100th time. His heart raced with a mix of fear and determination. Today was not just another day. It was a moment that could define his future. The words of his teacher echoed in his mind, urging him to be brave, to let his voice be heard. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "This is for everyone who feels unheard," he murmured to his reflection, as if to summon courage from within. Meanwhile, Jake sat in his patrol car, the weight of the badge heavy on his chest. He stared out at the gathering crowd, a sea of faces filled with passion and purpose. The voices of the protesters drifted through his window, a blend of chants and slogans demanding justice and change. He felt a pull in his gut, a conflict brewing inside him. On one hand, he was a police officer, sworn to uphold the law. On the other, he was beginning to question the very system he represented. The memory of Malik's face, filled with hurt and anger, haunted him. "What if I could make a difference?" he thought, but doubt quickly clouded that thought. What could he do? As Malik approached the makeshift stage, he could feel the energy of the crowd pulsating around him. He looked out at the sea of people, some holding signs that read "Black Lives Matter" and "Justice for All." His palms were sweaty, and his stomach churned with nerves. Just speak from the heart, his mother had encouraged him earlier, her voice full of unwavering support. Malik nodded to himself, trying to shake off the anxiety. As he climbed onto the stage, he could feel the eyes of the crowd on him, a mix of hope and expectation swirling in the air. "Thank you all for being here today." Malik's voice rang out, shaking slightly at the beginning but growing steadier with each word. "I stand here not just for myself, but for all of us who have felt the sting of injustice and the weight of prejudice." The crowd erupted in cheers, fueling his courage. He continued, "We deserve to be seen as who we really are, not just by the color of our skin or the clothes we wear." Jake listened intently from his car, his heart racing. He had come here to do his job, to ensure the protest remained peaceful, but as Malik spoke, he felt an overwhelming urge to step out of his vehicle and join the crowd. "What am I doing?" he thought, wrestling with himself. "I can't just sit here." The words Malik spoke resonated deeply within him, stirring feelings he had long buried under layers of duty and detachment. "I know there are many of you who have faced the same struggles I have," Malik continued, his voice rising with emotion. "We cannot let fear silence us. We must unite and demand the respect we deserve." The crowd cheered louder, clapping and chanting his name. In that moment, Malik felt invincible, a beacon of hope for those who felt powerless. Taking a deep breath, Jake finally made a decision. He opened his car door and stepped out, the sunlight hitting his face. The noise of the protest washed over him, and he followed the sound toward the crowd. As he approached, he noticed Malik's earnest expression, and for the first time, he truly saw him, not as a suspect or a statistic, but as a young man with dreams and a voice. Jake stood at the edge of the crowd, feeling a mix of fear and exhilaration. When Malik finished his speech, the crowd erupted in applause, and Jake seized the moment. Heart pounding, he stepped forward, breaking through the wall of people. "Excuse me," he shouted, raising his hands to calm the murmurs of surprise. "I need to speak." Malik turned, his eyes widening as he recognized the officer who had once humiliated him. The crowd fell silent, eyes darting between them, uncertainty hanging in the air. "I'm Jake Thompson," he introduced himself, his voice steady but vulnerable. "And I want to apologize to you, Malik, for how I treated you the other day. I've made mistakes, and I want to learn." The crowd shifted, whispers of disbelief and curiosity rippling through them. Malik's expression was a mix of surprise and caution. "Why are you here?" Malik asked, his voice low, laced with skepticism. "I'm here because I want to understand," Jake replied, sincerity pouring from his words. I've been blind to my own biases, and I need to change. I want to help bridge the gap between the police and the community. There was a silence, heavy with potential, as Malik considered Jake's words. The reality of their shared pain hung between them, a silent acknowledgement of the struggles they both faced. As protesters chanted and waved their signs, Malik felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through him. The energy of the crowd was palpable. He had just shared his story, laying bare the pain and humiliation he had experienced at the hands of a police officer. The audience had listened intently, many nodding in understanding. But now, as he stepped down from the makeshift podium, he sensed a weight lingering in the air. His confrontation with Jake Thompson was yet to come. Jake stood at the periphery, his heart pounding in his chest. He had always been on the other side of such gatherings, a figure of authority, but today felt different. Today, he was a witness to something transformative. He watched Malik, a young man who had risen from a place of hurt, confronting the very system Jake represented. Guilt gnawed at him, a bitter reminder of his earlier actions. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward, threading through the crowd as he searched for Malik. When their eyes finally met, Malik's expression was a mix of defiance and caution. He had heard the murmurs from the crowd, the whispers of who Jake was, the officer who had humiliated him just weeks before. The tension thickened as Jake approached, his uniform feeling heavier than ever. Malik, Jake started, his voice barely rising above the ambient noise. Can we talk? Malik crossed his arms, a protective gesture. What's there to talk about? You've said enough already, he shot back, his tone sharp. Jake winced at the accusation, but he pressed on. I know I messed up. I know what I did was wrong. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Malik looked at him incredulously. Sorry? You think that just makes everything okay? You think that erases how you made me feel? His voice trembled slightly, the weight of his emotions evident. I didn't realize it at the time, Jake replied, his eyes searching Malik's for some hint of understanding. I was wrong to assume you were a criminal just because of how you looked. I've been struggling with my own biases, and I let them cloud my judgment. Malik's defenses softened just a bit, but he wasn't ready to drop his guard completely. You don't know what it's like to walk around with that fear, to be judged before you even open your mouth. You don't know how hard it is to focus on my future when all people see is a stereotype. I'm learning, Jake insisted, his tone earnest. I've been reflecting on my life, my choices. I don't want to be that person anymore. I don't want to perpetuate this cycle. I want to understand. Silence enveloped them, the noise of the protest fading into a distant hum. Malik was taken aback by Jake's vulnerability. Was this the same officer who had made him feel so small? The man before him seemed lost, grappling with the consequences of his actions. What do you expect me to say? Malik finally asked, his voice quieter, almost contemplative. You can't just apologize and think everything will change. Trust doesn't work like that. I know, Jake replied, his voice steady, but I want to try. I want to do better. I want to support movements like this, not fight against them. I want to hear your story, hear from others like you. I want to learn how to build trust instead of break it. Malik studied Jake's face, searching for any sign of insincerity, but all he found was a man in distress, grappling with his own identity. You think it's that easy? Malik said, a hint of skepticism in his voice. You think you can just flip a switch and be an ally? It takes time. It takes real work. I understand that, Jake said, his expression earnest. I'm willing to put in the work. I just want the chance to prove it to you and others in the community. Malik felt a flicker of something, maybe hope, or perhaps it was just curiosity. I can't promise anything, but if you're serious about this, then let's see what you can do. Actions speak louder than words, Officer Thompson. Jake nodded, relief washing over him. That's all I ask for, an opportunity to change. I'll do whatever it takes. As they stood there, two men from vastly different worlds, They began to understand that healing wouldn't happen overnight. But it was a start, a tentative step toward bridging the gap that had once felt insurmountable. Jake Thompson sat in his car, parked outside the precinct, staring blankly at the dashboard. The chaos of the protest still echoed in his mind, along with the weight of Malik Johnson's words. He had never truly considered how his actions might harm someone like Malik, a young man with dreams that mirrored the aspirations of so many others. The confrontation had shaken him deeply, and he knew that change was imperative, not just for his own sake, but for the community he was sworn to protect. Determined to make a difference, Jake signed up for a series of workshops focused on bias training and community relations. The first session was held in a dimly lit room, filled with officers who seemed skeptical of the endeavor. As the facilitator, a passionate woman named Clara began to speak. Jake listened intently, absorbing every word. "Change starts with understanding," Clara emphasized, her eyes scanning the room. "You must acknowledge your biases if you want to connect with the community on a deeper level. It's about seeing people as individuals, not just statistics or suspects." Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat, reflecting on how he had failed Malik. The memories of their earlier encounter replayed in his mind. The insults, the judgment, the refusal to listen. He could feel the shame creeping up on him, but he also felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this was the first step toward redemption. After the workshop, Jake approached Clara. "I want to do more than just attend these sessions. I need to actively demonstrate this change," he said earnestly. Clara smiled, her expression warm. "That's the spirit, Jake. Why not start by engaging with the community? Volunteer at local events, attend town hall meetings, and most importantly, listen." Meanwhile, Malik Johnson was navigating his own journey of growth. After the protest, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was determined to rise above the humiliation he had faced and channel his pain into something productive. The encouragement from his teacher had sparked a fire within him, and he began to immerse himself in his studies and community service. One afternoon, Malik sat in his modest bedroom, surrounded by textbooks and notes. The sunlight streamed through the window, casting a warm glow on his desk. He picked up his phone and texted his friend, Jamal. "Hey, I'm thinking of starting a study group for our history class. Want to help?" A moment later, his phone buzzed with a reply, "Sounds great. Let's get everyone together. We can make it fun." Malik grinned, excited by the prospect. He realized that education could be a powerful tool for change, not just for him, but for others in his community. He was determined to help others find their voices, just as he had begun to do for himself. As the weeks passed, Jake and Malik's paths continued to intersect, albeit indirectly. One day, while volunteering at a community event, Jake watched from the sidelines as Malik spoke to a group of young people, his passion evident. Malik was filled with energy, encouraging his peers to pursue their education and stand up for their rights. "Your dreams matter. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise," Malik declared, his voice resonating with conviction. The crowd erupted in applause, and Jake felt an overwhelming sense of pride for Malik. That evening, Jake found himself reflecting on his own life choices. He picked up the phone and called his brother, who had struggled with the law in the past. "Hey man, I've been thinking about our talks from back in the day. I want to do better, both for you and for the community." "What's going on, Jake?" his brother asked, curiosity piqued. "I'm trying to change how I approach my job. I want to be a better officer, someone who listens, not just enforces. I want to help people like Malik," Jake admitted. "Sounds like you're on the right path, bro. Just remember, it's about the long game," his brother replied, a hint of pride in his voice. As Jake continued to attend workshops and engage with the community, he found himself in a transformative journey. He was no longer just a badge. He was becoming a bridge, a connection between law enforcement and the very community he had once judged. He realized that change was possible, but it required vulnerability, humility, and a willingness to grow. In the heart of Chicago, two lives were slowly intertwining, Jake and Malik, both striving for understanding and connection. Each step they took was a testament to the power of empathy, and both were determined to forge a new path, one that could inspire hope and healing in their fractured world. The evening sun cast a warm glow over Chicago, but it did little to alleviate the mounting pressure on Malik Johnson's mother, Angela. As a leader of the community movement against police brutality, she found herself at the center of a storm. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of protests, meetings, and media attention, but with the heightened visibility came intense scrutiny. Malik watched her pace anxiously in their small living room, the worry etched into her features. "Mom," Malik said softly, breaking the silence, "you need to take a break. You're doing so much already." Angela stopped and turned to him, her hands trembling slightly. "I can't, Malik. If I step back now, everything we've fought for could crumble. People are counting on me. You're just one person, though. You can't carry the weight of the whole community by yourself." "It's okay to feel tired," he replied, concern lacing his voice. She let out a sigh, her shoulders slumping. "I just feel like I'm losing control of everything. The media is relentless, and I'm being painted as some sort of villain for wanting change. It's exhausting." Malik stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're not a villain. You're a hero to so many. Just remember to take care of yourself, too. We need you strong." Angela managed a faint smile, appreciating her son's support, but the shadow of doubt still loomed large. "I just wish things would change faster. I want to see justice for those who've suffered." Meanwhile, just a few blocks away, Officer Jake Thompson found himself in the middle of a tense situation. The police radio crackled to life, relaying a report of a disturbance in a neighborhood notorious for its violence. As he drove towards the scene, memories of his previous encounter with Malik flooded his mind. He recalled the young man's raw vulnerability and the pain he had shared. Arriving at the scene, Jake stepped out of his patrol car, his heart racing. A young man, no older than Malik, was surrounded by several officers, his hands raised in surrender. The tension in the air was palpable, and Jake felt a sense of dread wash over him. "What's going on here?" Jake asked, striding forward. The officer in charge, a seasoned cop named Rodriguez, glanced at Jake. "Just a routine stop, nothing to worry about." This kid was acting suspiciously. Jake's instincts kicked in. He had seen enough to know that suspicious could often be a euphemism for something far more sinister. He took a deep breath, remembering Malik's words about seeing the person behind the badge. "Wait a minute," Jake said, raising his hand to halt the proceedings. "Let's not escalate this. We should talk to him before jumping to conclusions." Rodriguez frowned, clearly irritated. "Come on, Jake. We've got protocols to follow here. Protocols that often lead to tragedy." Jake shot back, his voice firm. "Let's give him a chance to explain." The young man looked at Jake, confusion and fear mingling in his eyes. "I'm just trying to get home, man. I didn't do anything wrong." Jake stepped closer, lowering his voice. "What's your name?" "Isaiah," the young man replied, his voice shaky. "Isaiah, I need you to stay calm," Jake said, maintaining eye contact. "Tell me what happened." As Isaiah spoke, Jake listened intently, gauging the situation. The kid was clearly frightened, but trying to remain composed. He spoke about being late for a tutoring session and how the officers had approached him with hostility, assuming the worst. "This isn't right," Jake muttered to himself, feeling a surge of empathy. The anger and frustration that had been brewing within him for months began to bubble to the surface. He realized that he had a choice to make, a choice that could either perpetuate the cycle of fear or break it. With newfound resolve, Jake addressed the officers. "Stand down. We need to handle this differently. Let's not ruin another young life today." Rodriguez looked taken aback, but the tension in the air began to ease as Jake's words sank in. The other officers exchanged glances, unsure of how to proceed. "Are you serious?" Rodriguez asked incredulously. "I am," Jake replied, his gaze unwavering. "This isn't just about policing. It's about being human. We can't keep treating our community like this and expect things to change. The atmosphere shifted. Jake's words had struck a chord, and the officers began to step back, allowing Isaiah some space to breathe. He looked at Jake, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. "Thank you," Isaiah whispered, relief washing over him. As the scene gradually de-escalated, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was a turning point, not just for Isaiah, but for himself as well. The weight of his past actions felt heavy, but in that instant, he understood that change began with a single choice, and he chose empathy. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm orange glow over Chicago as Malik sat in front of the television, his heart racing in anticipation. He was about to be featured on a national program that focused on social issues affecting communities across the country. The camera panned across the studio, showcasing the audience filled with people eager to hear from young activists like him. Malik adjusted his shirt, taking a deep breath as he thought about everything he had been through. Next up, we have Malik Johnson, a young man from Chicago who has turned his painful experiences into a powerful message of hope and change. The host announced, his voice resonating with enthusiasm. Malik felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. He had rehearsed his speech countless times, but now, in front of the cameras, his words felt heavier. He glanced at his mother, seated in the audience, her eyes filled with pride and encouragement. As the host introduced him, Malik stood up, his legs trembling slightly. He walked to the center of the stage, the bright lights shining down on him. "Thank you for having me," he began, his voice steady despite the nerves. "I want to share my story, not just to highlight the injustices that exist, but to show how we can overcome them together." The audience listened intently as Malik recounted his encounter with Officer Jake Thompson. "I was just a kid on my way to school, and I was treated like a criminal. It hurt, not just because of the words he used, but because I felt invisible. I felt like my dreams didn't matter." His voice cracked slightly, but he pressed on, recalling how he found strength in his mother and his teacher's encouragement. "But I realized that I am not defined by someone else's prejudice. I am more than what they see." As Malik spoke, Jake sat alone in his living room, glued to the screen. He had watched the news about the protest and felt compelled to turn on the television that evening. The moment he saw Malik step on stage, a rush of pride and guilt washed over him. "He's so brave," Jake muttered, his heart heavy with the weight of his past actions. "I can't believe I treated him like that." Malik continued to share his vision for a better future, one where understanding replaces fear. "We need to build bridges, not walls. We need to listen to each other and find common ground." The audience erupted in applause, and Malik felt a surge of hope. He knew that his words were resonating, not just with the crowd, but with countless others watching from their homes. After the show ended, Malik returned to his mother, who enveloped him in a tight embrace. Tears glistened in her eyes. "You did amazing, Malik. I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice filled with warmth. "You're going to inspire so many people." "Thanks, Mom," Malik replied, a smile breaking through his earlier anxiety. "I just hope it makes a difference." Meanwhile, Jake sat on his couch, reflecting on what he had just witnessed. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he had saved but never used. The line rang twice before it was answered. "Hello?" a familiar voice said. "Hi, is this Malik's mom?" Jake asked, his heart pounding. "Yes, this is she." "Who's calling?" she replied, her tone cautious. "It's Jake Thompson. I'm a police officer, the one who had that encounter with Malik a while back. I just watched him on the television," he said, trying to find the right words. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Yes, I remember you. What do you want?" she asked, her voice laced with both curiosity and skepticism. "I want to help," Jake said, his voice firm but sincere. "I know I've made mistakes, and I can't undo the past, but I want to support Malik and the community. I want to be part of the change." "Why should I believe you?" she asked, her tone still wary. "Because I've seen the impact of my actions. Watching Malik today made me realize how wrong I was. I want to learn and do better, he replied, the sincerity of his words filling the silence. After a moment, she sighed. If you're serious, then let's meet. But know this, it's going to take more than words to earn our trust. I understand, Jake responded, gratitude flooding through him. Thank you for giving me a chance. As he hung up, Jake felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to step into the unknown, to learn, and to fight alongside Malik for a better future. The sun dipped low in the Chicago skyline, casting long shadows across the community center where Jake Thompson stood, a sense of purpose coursing through him. It had been months since his chance encounter with Malik Johnson, and the impact of that conversation rippled through his life. Jake had committed himself to change, not just for himself, but for the community he patrolled. He was determined to bridge the gap between the police and the residents, to foster understanding instead of fear. Jake entered the community center, where a meeting was already buzzing with energy. Residents gathered at tables, discussing issues that affected their neighborhood. As he approached the front, he felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. Would they accept him? Would they see him as just another cop, or could he be a part of something greater? "Hey, Officer Thompson," a voice called out. It was Malik, who had become a notable figure in the community, his passionate speeches inspiring many. Malik waved him over, his smile brightening the room. "Glad you could make it. We're about to start discussing the new community policing initiative." "Thanks for having me, Malik," Jake replied, his voice steady but his heart racing. "I want to help, truly." Malik clapped him on the back, guiding him to a seat at the front. "We need people like you, Jake. People who understand the struggle and want to be part of the solution. You ready to listen?" Jake nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. "I'm all ears. I know I've made mistakes, and I want to learn." As the meeting unfolded, the room filled with voices. Mothers discussing their fears for their children, young men sharing their experiences with police encounters, and elders reminiscing about a time when the community felt safer. Each story hit Jake like a punch to the gut, reminding him of the biases he had carried and the judgments he had made. Officer Thompson, an older woman, raised her hand, her brow furrowed with concern. "How can we trust you when most of your colleagues still see us as criminals?" Jake took a deep breath, preparing to address the room. "I understand your skepticism," he began, his voice firm yet compassionate. "I've been part of that problem, but I'm here to change that perception, to show you that not all of us feel that way." Malik interjected, "It's not just about words, Jake. We need action. We need you to stand by us, to show that you're truly invested in our lives." "I agree," Jake replied, feeling the weight of the moment. "I'm committed to attending community meetings, to listening to your concerns, and to working with you to build trust. I want to be a part of the change." The room fell silent for a moment, then erupted into a mix of applause and murmurs of cautious optimism. Jake saw Malik's eyes shining with approval, and it fueled his determination. As the meeting continued, Malik presented his vision for a community police partnership. "We can create programs that foster dialogue between us. We can have police officers attend our community events, and in return, we can invite you into our homes to understand our lives." Jake chimed in, "That's a great idea, Malik. We could organize workshops where officers learn about the history and culture of this community. It's about building bridges, not walls." A young man in the back spoke up, "But what about accountability? If another officer messes up, will you stand with us?" Jake met the young man's gaze, unwavering. "Yes, I will stand with you. I will fight for accountability. We need to make sure everyone in the department understands that we are here to serve and protect, not intimidate." As the meeting wrapped up, Jake felt a sense of hope. He had begun to forge connections, to listen and learn, and to be part of a movement that was larger than himself. "Hey, Jake," Malik said, catching him before he left. "You did good today. Just remember, it's going to take time. Change doesn't happen overnight." Jake nodded, a smile creeping across his face. "I'm ready for the challenge, Malik." Together, We can make a difference. As they stepped outside, the sun set behind them, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The air was filled with a sense of possibility, and for the first time in a long while, Jake felt like he was on the right path. As sun began to set over Chicago, casting a warm golden hue over the gathered crowd, Malik stood at the podium, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked out at the sea of faces, a mixture of anger, hope, and determination. Next to him, Jake stood rigidly, his badge glinting in the fading light, a reminder of the weight of his role. The air was thick with tension as Malik prepared to address the community in light of the recent police incident involving his friend. "Ladies and gentlemen," Malik began, his voice steady yet emotional. "We're here today not just to grieve, but to demand change. We cannot let fear dictate our lives or our futures. My friend was not a criminal. He was a kid who made a mistake, and he deserved compassion, not brutality." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Malik's pulse quickened as he continued. "We need to face the truth of what's happening in our streets. We need to hold those in power accountable, but we also need to foster understanding. We can't keep living in a world where we're pitted against each other because of our differences." Jake listened intently, feeling the weight of Malik's words. He had come to understand the importance of seeing beyond the badge, beyond the uniform. Yet, as the speech progressed, he felt a growing unease in the pit of his stomach. He knew that, despite his efforts to change, the shadow of his past decisions loomed large. Then, just as Malik was about to make a powerful point, a commotion erupted at the back of the crowd. A group of protesters shouted, brandishing phones showing the graphic footage of the incident that had sparked this uproar. A chorus of shouts filled the air. "Justice for Jamal," they cried, their voices rising in a crescendo of anger. "The police are out of control." Malik's eyes widened in alarm as he recognized the footage. It depicted his friend, hands raised, trying to comply with commands, only to be met with force. The crowd's reaction was immediate and visceral, drowning out Malik's words. Panic coursed through him, and he turned to Jake, desperation etched on his face. "This isn't what we wanted. We were supposed to unite." Jake felt his heart race. He could see the anger boiling over, the potential for violence lurking just beneath the surface. The crowd was restless, and he knew that he had to act swiftly. "Malik," he said urgently, "we need to calm them down. If this escalates, it'll make everything worse." Malik nodded, but the fear in his eyes was palpable. "How can I? They don't trust you. They don't trust us." In that moment of uncertainty, Jake felt a surge of resolve. He took a deep breath, stepping slightly away from the podium. "No," he said firmly, "but maybe they'll trust me if I stand with you." Malik looked at him incredulously. "What do you mean?" With determination, Jake stepped forward, addressing the crowd. "Listen up," he shouted, his voice firm but calm. "I'm Officer Jake Thompson, and I'm here to stand by Malik and this community. I know I've made mistakes. I know that I've been part of the problem, but I want to be part of the solution." The crowd fell silent, confusion mingling with curiosity. Jake continued, "I've seen the pain that my actions have caused. I've seen the fear in the eyes of young men like Malik when they interact with people like me. That stops today. We need to acknowledge our faults and work together to change this narrative." Malik's heart raced as he watched Jake speak. "Are you sure about this?" he whispered, uncertainty creeping into his voice. "I am," Jake replied, his eyes locked on Malik's. "We need to show them we're united. We need to show them that there are people in law enforcement who truly care." As Jake's words hung in the air, the crowd began to process the weight of his admission. A ripple of murmurs spread, shifting the energy from anger to contemplation. Malik took a step forward, his voice now steadier. "We can't ignore the truths that hurt us, but we can use that pain to fuel a movement for change. Together, we can be the voice that demands accountability from those who have failed us." Jake nodded, glancing at Malik with newfound respect. "I stand with you, Malik. Let's make this community a better place for everyone, he said, the sincerity in his tone resonating with the crowd. In that pivotal moment, the tide began to turn. The cries for justice transformed into chants for unity. The crowd, once furious, started to embrace the possibility of change, fueled by the unexpected alliance between a young man seeking justice and the officer who had once wronged him. Together, they were no longer just a community divided by fear and prejudice. They were a collective force, ready to push for a future where empathy prevailed over animosity. I sincerely hope that you were enchanted by this story. I'm sure the next video that appears to you will also touch your heart. So, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our next stories. A big hug and see you next time.